Hello, Chad. Um, I was reminded today was Friday, which honestly was kind of news to me. Not that I confused it with a different day, but because I have forgotten that there are days of the week at all at this point. So, uh, happy Friday for those who celebrate. Someone like, I don't know, there's like a trailer with like a bunch of different random things. We're at a brick wall now, so I'd show you, but I kind of have to do this today's pod a little fast. I started a little late and my phone needed to charge, so uh, unfortunately, uh, charging the phone took some time. Then, as I'm walking out to start doing this, takes a little time. So, kind of want to get going. And because it's going to take time, I think I only have one question. And try to squeeze a technical question at the end. But I got one, which seems to be a little spicy. But this one comes from Tim. By the way, if you're interested in asking questions in the Discord, Yap Wayne questions. I try to answer all of them. And right now, after this, I think I'm caught up. But this question's from Tim. Is it like what's the vibe on being on having an advanced degree, PhD, masters, bachelors, no degree? Like, what's typical in that respect in baseball, and in general, like, what is the perception of people with more of the graduate degrees, masters, PhD, in the sport? So this is a little divisive because there's a pretty common, I don't know if it's a stereotype, but there's a common thought that if you have a PhD, that's off-putting. If you have a PhD, people think like that's intimidating, that you're too academic oriented, you're coming at a problem with, from an angle that is very difficult to communicate and really to apply at the end of the day. So so there's this thought that like having a PhD in some subject might make you less attractive to be hired. So it's a two-part question. One, the PhD thing, and then also just degrees in general. So I'll start with the easier side of it. PhDs in general easier side of it with just degrees. In baseball, you have an extremely wide variety of degrees. Way, way, way wide. Hold on one second, Chad. It's the season ticket member day. All right, good. Season ticket member day. See, look. Welcome, season ticket members. So, I thought maybe I was gonna see some more fanfare on the field, but usually what they do is like a speaker series, like one of the players or one of the coaches or both talk to season ticket holders, and they get to do a Q&A, and then they get some free balls and get some stuff signed. So it's pretty cool, but it might be done, or they might just be setting up for it right now. So anyway, always something at the park, you know. So when it comes to degrees, baseball has a wide variety of degrees, and for such a technical field, and I do use that literally, given the amount of video and analytics that go into producing the on-field product, there's actually probably a pretty wide representation of people with like no degree, high school degree, some college, but not necessarily or not necessarily bachelor's degrees. And the number one reason why is because a large amount of the people, not a large amount, but a healthy amount of people who were former players enter the industry through a team doing, whether it's scouting, video, some sort of analytics, some sort of coaching. They usually, after their career is over, it's not like they went to school during their playing time. And so you have a lot of people who have tons and tons of domain expertise, tons and tons of like knowledge about operations, what's important to have at any given time, what timing looks like, what players and coaches prefer in terms of some of these more technical things, whether it's video or reports or whatever. So you build up a lot of expertise just by being in the game. And during your time in baseball, you're not necessarily, taking classes or going to school. You're not expected to. You can. A lot of people go back and finish their degrees. The Reds have a particular program where people who are in our Dominican Academy, we send them through a high school diploma program led by our director of education, and they're actually able to graduate with their high school diplomas. There's a few articles on us doing that, by the way, out there on the internet. So you have people who more often than not continuing or finishing their school. And that's fine. Like, they're professional baseball players, that's their job. But once they're done with baseball, okay, well, what do they do? Well, they tend to work in baseball. And a lot of the jobs that they're doing are things like scouting or video, or if they're working in an analytics department or a coaching department, they're putting together reports and handling a lot of the day-to-day operations of a team. And there are people who didn't get their degrees or had not a lot of courses towards their degree, or they're a handful of classes off from finishing a particular degree. But it's a good amount of people who do that, and a lot of the time it's skewed because it's usually players who are in that role. So while there's a precedence of like careers that typically would require having a degree, the way that the industry has evolved is like, well, not everyone gets degrees and they know a lot about baseball, so what do? Well, you hire them and you put them in the best position possible. And so you have a lot of players who don't have degrees, and that's fine. On the other side, you have a lot of people who have really advanced degrees. I'm one of them. I have my PhD in psychology, and my PhD work was based in cognitive neuroscience. I've published several papers in the realm of cognitive neuroscience and cognitive psychology. By all measures and metrics, not only do I have the degree, but I've done all the work that truly says, yes, that guy did academic neuroscience. So I am that guy. I'm one of them. And my department has another two, one with a theoretical physics PhD, which he likes to say it is theoretical physics and not the applied stuff. So he's not working on like CERN and rocketry, but he's doing more proofing out stuff, more like the Feynman or not Bill Gates. What was his name? I don't remember. Everyone knows who I'm talking about, though. So you have a theoretical. Oh, sorry. This is the thing. Oh, wait. Oh, and I have my. So I put this on noise canceling mode now. So I put this on noise canceling mode now. So I hopefully this is actually okay. Hopefully. You tell me, chat. I think I did take a listen to it the other day, and I think it actually worked out pretty well. Oh, there's a field trip, so there. If you can hear me, clap once, clap twice. Okay, nice. Anyway, the one's a theoretical physicist. Has a PhD, was a professor for many years. Was at UT Dallas, I believe, teaching physics for a long time. And then switched over to data science, and then made his way into baseball. So then we have another who's is younger in his career development and also in his PhD ownership, but he got his PhD in communications and while that sounds like, oh, communications PhD, well, it was more like sociology and psychology based, lots of stats. So causal relationships of social networks and spread of information through digital communication. So lots of stats, lots of network math. And he has his PhD. Didn't work in baseball before, and now works in baseball, and he is learning more baseball, but definitely bought high on his ability to get through all this super technical stuff. And he is progressing very well through more of the nitty-gritty baseball stuff. So, have him, and there's someone who is currently a couple years away from his PhD. I believe he's getting his PhD in information technology. He's like a systems and information kind of person. One of those like strong methodological types. He's awesome. So And then you have a bunch of people with their masters. I think 4 people in my department have master's degrees. And then I think that leaves me with 4 others, and they all have their bachelors. So, it not only is it a field trip day for some of these kids, but it's also season ticket holder day, and they are set up to do it. So we were watching them set up. So, but there's a lot of people, more people in the concourse than you typically would see. So that's good. But it's a little loud, so I'm gonna try to run away here. Okay, so in terms of degrees and what we have, we have the gamut of people with degrees, people with really strong degrees, high levels of education, all sorts of different varieties of experience. So I tend to think like, and my hiring practices exhibit this, that the degrees really don't matter that much, right? At the end of the day, it's about the skills. And the number one skill that we're evaluating is whether or not you can contribute to the quantitative side of baseball. If you could quantify that through programmatic means, then that's good, right? That doesn't require you to have a, lower end or a floor of, or prerequisite of some advanced degree. So long as you can do the work, that's all I care about, right? Okay. So what else is it about doing the work? There's the person cleaning the concourse. So, kind of loud. Sorry, chat. So what is it about someone with, why do some of these things require advanced degrees? Well, some people are just believing that a program of study trains them up to have a base set of knowledge that you could apply immediately once you hire them. But while that might be true, the number one thing that tends to be more important, at least in my field or my industry, is how you communicate your findings, how you communicate your information. And being in a few different industries now, that tends to be the number one thing everywhere. It's not necessarily about the smartest person, but it's about someone who's a smart communicator. Are you able to communicate your information effectively, succinctly, and at the end of the day, actionably? Like, if you say stuff, can you see where the application or where the value is for your stuff? So this is where it gets a little askew, is where the second part of the question comes in. Do PhDs have some inability to do that? Are they so-called too academic? Are they thinking about it so nuanced that they lose the forest for the trees? And I would say that the stereotype of like the academic who doesn't know ball is somewhat, it's because of a lot of people's bad experiences with people who believe they're smarter than the people who are actively working and doing this stuff, right? So an example is, say you're doing all this analytic stuff and you have this way of pushing out projects, prioritizing projects, etc. And someone from the outside says like, wow, so you do it, you prioritize all these projects. What happens when you have a really good idea? Do you just have to wait for the next sprint to do it? No, like, use your brain, right? Like, if there seems to be some game-changing information that we could produce, then we prioritize that, right? There isn't some like rigid barrier that makes us unable to change, you know? So when you hear that of like someone who's just naive, a lot of the time when you bring people in and they're naive and you put them in bad situations, communication can come off that way, right? Because either they're asking questions in order to figure out where the gaps are so they could contribute in a good way, or they make these kinds of comments and they come off as some sort of know-it-all in a bad way. And turns out, rather than scapegoating that this person's just a bad communicator, they scapegoat some other things about the person. Whether it's their degree, whether it's their experience, whether it's them not having any actual sports-related playing time, whether how they present themselves. All these things that sound like you're just picking at different aspects about a person, when really like the root of it is, well, that person just is a bad communicator. It's not because of all these other things, because their communication is poor. So, when I hear of stuff like, oh, like people are intimidated, people would rather not hire someone who might be overqualified. Well, all of these things might be true for different companies or different people, but my personal experience is like, that's not really true for me or my company or companies I've worked at. Rather, the opposite. Usually, regardless of degree, there's a slow onboarding and on-ramping to being put in front of people to communicate info. Because it is important to get off on the right foot, to be on the same page, and to understand what good communication and effective communication looks like. And everyone's very different, and how they like to receive information, how they like to turn information to actionability is very different across all sorts of different departments. And in terms of analytics, you're touching all departments, at least in terms of departments that are related to team operations. So if you have to communicate widely and efficiently, then your degrees, unless your degree is literally in how to talk to people effectively, then your degrees might not necessarily help you, regardless of the level of it or the absence of it. So I tend to think it's a little overblown that people say PhDs are overqualified or under-equipped to do certain things because other people, staff, coaches, players, etc., believe they don't fit in some way, whether it's communication styles, communication at all, how they think about the game, etc. Really, I don't put it on the person for not knowing what the best ways to do things is. I put it on that person's boss, that they're putting their employee in a situation where that could happen at all. Like, be a better boss. If you're going to hire a wide variety of people with all sorts of different skill sets, and you're also the person who's supposed to oversee their success, one of those successes is the ability to communicate your information effectively. And if you're just going to assume they're going to know how to do that, you've already lost one of the battles, which is making an assumption about a skill that you didn't assess for. You know? Like, you're not putting a coach or a player into some sort of panel interview and telling them, hey, we have this information, communicate it to this person. You don't have that. That's not a part of any interview process. And if it was, it'd be so like contrived that it'd be almost like a circus act, you know? The best ways to evaluate whether or not someone can communicate is through just the written technical assessment, and then if you do some sort of panel or one-on-one interviewing, how they communicate those results. And then you have to make your best judgment as someone who's experienced to say, all right, this is how I would train this person to start communicating outward. And in my department, a lot of the time, communication starts within. We communicate internally, and over time, you get to talk to stakeholders who have a lot more analytics experience than, say, a coach. Say it's an analyst or an assistant coach. And they can take all the info you have and then push it out. And over time, you do get more exposure to coaches and players and etc. because you're slowly getting trained up to communicate the way that the assistants communicate. And the assistants, they don't get hired by me, they get hired by usually the coaches or different staff because they are great communicators and great intersection points of all the different pieces of info that you need to have in order to be the most effective. So, overall, what do I think about this idea of communicating in PhDs being overqualified or poor communicators? I think less about the idea that people are afraid of talking to someone with advanced degrees. I think a little more that people are putting others in bad situations in terms of communicating. And you don't have to blame a person for knowing more or less. You should blame the person teeing them up to be perceived in poor ways. So, okay, I gotta go, chat. I told you this was a short one. I started late, so maybe I'll do one tonight. See ya.